Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our fourth Midwest Traffic Safety Conference. I'm Jennifer Cifaldi. I'm the I don't get to say I'm the Illinois Traffic Safety Resource Prosecutor anymore because I actually have a partner, Desiree Sirens. Desiree, can you wave back there? So she is the newest addition to the TSRP team. Very happy to have her here this year. Before I introduce our keynote speaker, I just wanted to note for the prosecutors in the room, you're probably wondering about CLEs. Unfortunately, the CLE board did not grant us permission to get credit for this morning's session. Those sessions will start for the CLEs at the next time, which I think is 10:15 is our next session. So make sure when you come into a room that you sign in, and then the evaluations this year, we are doing them through the QR codes that are in the rooms. And for the officers or anyone else in attendance, those QR codes also apply for you to give us an evaluation and your feedback. And we really appreciate that. That's really important to us so that we know going forward what topics were really good for you, what speakers were good, and that we can continue to build on what we've done so far and improve. So thank you for that. So it's my pleasure this morning to introduce Sheriff Mark Lamb. Sheriff Lamb was elected as the 24th Sheriff of Pinal County on January 1st, 2017. He oversees a county the size of Connecticut and manages more than 600 employees, and he manages a budget of over $60 million. Sheriff Lamb has taken a proactive approach to removing impaired drivers from the roadways of Illinois. I'm sorry, the roadways of Arizona. I'm so used to saying Illinois. Of Arizona, which is one of my favorite states. They do everything right with DUIs, and I've always bragged on Arizona. Sheriff Lamb is a nationally sought-after speaker who painfully shares his experience at impaired driving and traffic safety events across the United States. 3 fun facts about Sheriff Lamb that you might not know is he was born and raised in Hawaii. He has never, ever had even a sip of alcohol. Total respect for that. And this one really has me interested. He has spent time in a Panamanian jail. So we're going to have to let him explain that one. So without further ado, it is my honor and privilege to introduce Sheriff Mark Lamb.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you. Turn this mic on here. Well, thank you guys for having me. John, nobody ever answers questions at police events. So the only people probably raising their hands were the prosecutors. Everybody else, I've learned that long ago. If you want, don't ask cops questions. They're not going to answer them anyway. I guarantee you almost 75% of this room are DRE coordinators. They just didn't raise their hand. Thank you guys so much for having me. I'll tell you the Panamanian jail one real quick. So I am the sheriff of Pinal County. I used to introduce myself as Sheriff Lamb. Now I introduce myself as Frank's boss from Fridays with Frank. The majority of you have probably seen a lot of those videos, and I'll probably chit-chat a little bit about that. We did Live PD back when Live PD was still on the air. We did 60 Days In, which was on A&E, and then when COVID happened and everybody's locked down, all of a sudden they put it on Netflix. I didn't know. All of a sudden people started saying, hey, I saw you on Netflix. I thought, oh, I'm not on Netflix. And sure enough, it was 60 Days In. So people know us from 60 Days In. But a lot of it is knowing us from what we do on social media and how we try to promote the profession that we all love and that we work in. Like she said, we are the size of the state of Connecticut and Pinal County. We're between Phoenix and Tucson. We are 600 employees. We've got a few, the largest portion, Santan Valley, is an unincorporated area. It's 130,000 people. So we patrol that as a sheriff's office. It's bigger than any of the other cities in our county. So the biggest population base belongs to us. We have about 500,000 citizens in our county. Half of those are under the jurisdiction, or we provide police services to them. I know you guys probably get this all the time. People will always ask me, Sheriff, what's it like being in law enforcement now, with the way that the media treats us, with the way that politicians look at us and treat us, with the way that society has oftentimes turned on us? And I always tell people, look, 98% of the people we deal with are good people, decent people, normal people. Some make mistakes, we got to hold them accountable. 1% of those people deserve to be in jail. And the other percent deserves to never see the light of day again. And half of that percent need to get out of politics. I know we're all glad it's over, by the way. They said no politics. That's as far as I'll go. All right? That's as far as I'll go. All right, so I'm a patriot who loves God, family, freedom, and the Constitution. That's why I do what I do, and I'm sure that's why a lot of you do what you do. How did I end up in a Panamanian jail? I was 17 years old. We lived in Panama. My dad moved to Panama, so I spent all my summers and spent all my off time in Panama. And we lived in the city. We weren't military. My dad was a businessman. So we had gone to work out at the gym, and it was my brother and his friend and me and my friend. And we were in our car trying to get out of this shopping center. And the guy in front of us wouldn't move. He had room to move. He wouldn't move. So my brother honks the horn, and he's totally ignoring him. So my brother gets mad. So then as he pulls out, it's rush hour traffic. So we start chasing this guy, and we're tailgating this guy. And we get up to some thicker traffic, and there's a bus ahead of us. So he moves over to the other lane, to the left lane. We move over too. Unbeknownst to us, he had slammed on his brakes. So boom, we slammed the brakes into him. He gets out and comes back towards my brother and just starts throwing punches. And my brother is a pugilist, and my brother one punches this guy and knocks him out in the middle of the street in all this traffic. So they came and hauled all four of us into the jail, and we sat there in jail until they figured out what they were going to do. By the end, they came back. Once they figured out the guy's face wasn't too broken, they let me and my brother go, and our friends go. So spent some time in Panamanian jail. It wasn't my fault. It's my brother's fault, but I spent some time there. I started my career in Salt River. I never even wanted to be a cop. I was a businessman. I grew up, nobody in my family was a cop. Never thought about being a cop ever. I grew up, I was 33 years old. I had my own business. But I knew that I wanted to do something different. You know, a lot of jobs don't give you any fulfillment. There's no effect on our communities. You don't go home and lay your head, even if it's a tough day, knowing that you did something. So I had this business, and my neighbor was a cop at Salt River, which is an Indian reservation tucked right in with Mesa, Tempe, and Scottsdale. And he convinces me to go on a ride-along. So we go on this ride-along. It's a graveyard shift. And we get a call for a dad who had found a 20-year-old with his 14-year-old daughter. So they get into a scuffle. The kid runs out the back. And you guys don't have Indian reservations out here, do you? Well, we got a bunch in Arizona. And the way it is, you'll have a house, and then behind it is probably a bunch of desert, maybe an old abandoned travel trailer. And so I get there. They let me out of the car. I don't know why, but I'm armed with a flashlight and courage, walking around like I know what's going on, you know. And I walk up to this old abandoned travel trailer, and I look through the window, and in there's a bunch of trash and debris. And in there, I think, underneath all of that trash, debris, clothes, I think I see what is a quarter size of skin. So I tell these guys, I'm like, hey, I think this guy's in here. So they go in there, move all the stuff. Sure enough, he's in there. They grab him, rough him up, tase him, put him in cuffs. I went home that morning, woke my wife up and said, honey, I'm going to be a cop. 6 months later, I was in the academy and went through Maricopa County Sheriff's Office Academy, but I was working for the Indian Reservation, Salt River, Pima, Maricopa Indian Community. And it was awesome. Alcohol's a little bit of a problem out there. So I spent my first part of my career out there. It was fantastic. I learned a lot about policing out there. I learned a lot about dealing with alcohol-related crimes, not just DUIs or those types of things, but also domestic violence, all the things that we do. When we do this job, it becomes a little mundane to us. Sometimes we start to think, is what we're doing worth it? You know, I heard a story that resonated with me the other day. It was a mom who was trying to get her son out of bed. So she gets up in the morning, goes in, wakes him up, says, Johnny, hey, you got to get up. You got school today. He says, Mom, I don't want to get up. The kids are mean. They bully me. I just don't want to get up. She said, look, I'm going to go get ready for school or for the day. When I come back, you need to be ready for school. You need to be up. So she goes in, gets ready, comes back in. He's still in bed. She said, what are you doing? I told you to get up. He said, Mom, I don't want to go. I know the teachers, they talk about me in the teacher's lounge. They're just mean. I just don't want to go. And she said, look, I'm going down to do breakfast. You better be out of bed when I get back up here. So she goes down, makes breakfast, comes back up, still in bed. She says, you got to get out of bed. He said, Mom, I don't want to go. She said, Johnny, you're the principal. You have to go. How often does it where we just don't necessarily want to get up? Sometimes we feel like, hey, what we're doing may not matter. You must have been looking at my notes because my notes say what we do matters. We got to get out of bed every day and do what needs to be done because somebody out there, somebody's life, somebody's family member is depending on you to get up, despite the fact that we may or may not want to get up. Like she said, I've never drank a drop of alcohol in my life. So now I'm going through the academy. I'm learning about DUI investigations. I didn't even really hang around people that drank a lot. So, and contrary to belief, I have this big old nose, but it doesn't work very well. I don't smell very good. So I'm going through the academy and I'm thinking, how am I going to figure out how to notice, how to find somebody that's drinking, that's under the influence of alcohol? And so this was really tough for me. I had to learn it in the academy. I paid a lot of attention. I get out the first night, I had an FTO. He was one of those FTOs that gave me the keys the first night and said, let's go. And everything we did the first night, I don't even know what I'm doing yet, I was doing. And we had a DUI my very first night on FTO that we pulled over, and now I'm walking up and I'm just butchering it. I'm sure if I went back and read the report or had a video of what I did that night, I'm sure it was awful. But I went through it that night, and I'm glad I did because I learned right away how to deal with DUI investigations. My smell doesn't work good, so here's how I always did it. In a report, if I told you that there is a moderate odor of alcohol, it's because I could barely smell it. And if there was a strong odor of alcohol, it's because to me, I could actually smell it. There would be guys show up on scene, they're like, oh man, that guy reeks of alcohol. I go, yeah, he does. He does stink. I just didn't, it was harder for me, but I started looking at the things, the HGN, the other cues of impairment that we get taught throughout it, that's what I started relying on, and I relied on whatever I could. And I got pretty darn good at doing these types of investigations. I actually got to where I took all these extra shifts. I took DUI task force shifts because I had really enjoyed doing DUI investigations, and I love taking these people off the street that were a potential harm to other people. Now, on the Salt River Indian Reservation, not only do you have tribal members that might be under the influence of alcohol, which is I'm going to tell you about that in a second. We also had all the spillover from Scottsdale. All these people go into the clubs in Scottsdale, they drink a ton, and then they don't know where the hell they're going, and they end up on the reservation, driving on these roads out in the middle of nowhere. And that was a good sign. That was one of the number one cues of impairment. What are you doing out here in the middle of the night? You'd find these people, pull them over. On the reservation, there's tribal law, there's state law, there's federal law. State law does not apply to Native Americans on the tribe, or that are on the reservation. So when we pull people over for DUI, the investigation was the same, but the consequences were absolutely not the same on the reservation. We'd have guys that would get 30 DUIs and they'd have 0 points on their record stateside, never had a DUI per the state. They wouldn't lose their license. They were able to continue driving. And we would pull these people over and over again for DUIs because there was very little consequences for them within the tribal stuff, and certainly no federal law unless they killed somebody in an accident, and even that would have been a stretch federally. The max sentence for somebody on the reservation was a year. If they had multiple DUIs, they wouldn't get hardly any time, but the most they could ever get was a year. Another story I heard is they were doing a DUI checkpoint, and the officer pulls his car over, and it smells of alcohol. And so the officer asked the guy, he's doing his stuff, and he says, hey, would you mind blowing in this PVT? Guy blows in the PVT, positive. He's under the influence, over the legal limit. He says, that's BS, I haven't been drinking. Here, have my wife blow into it. So they hand it over to the wife, go to the other side of the car. The wife blows into it. She registers over the legal limit. They're like, no, this thing's not working. Here, put it on our son in the back seat. So they take it to the little kid in the back seat. He blows in it. It blows positive. They said, perplexed as the officer was, he said, okay, well, I guess have a good night. And just as he was getting ready to leave, he told his wife, see, I told you it wouldn't hurt him to give it a little taste. That's not true, by the way. What we do matters in what we're doing on our job. And getting out here and getting to these trainings makes you better at what you do. You sharpen those skills. Arizona's laws changed quite a bit. So after I was at Salt River, I go over to Pinal County. And right about that time, they changed the marijuana laws in Arizona. So now marijuana was now legal. Medical marijuana was now legal. 2010, 11, 12, they became legal. So now what we started seeing was the DUI marijuana. We started seeing more and more of those. Those were a little tougher because a lot of us weren't DRE. At the time, everybody was pretty much HGN, but only your motors, for the most part, were A-Ride or DRE. So now it started getting a little bit tougher unless you've gone and gotten a little bit more training. And then, as we started progressing, in Arizona in 2020, I think it was, they passed recreational marijuana. They put it on a ballot measure. The people voted for it. They passed medical marijuana. Now, medical marijuana presented another challenge. Recreational marijuana presented another challenge because now a lot of people were smoking marijuana. We went to up to 70% of our DUIs started being marijuana or Xanax, fake Xanax. We'd find these moms going to school in the morning that were under the influence of a fake Xanax or a Xanax. We started getting a lot of people under the influence of marijuana. They thought because they had a marijuana card when it was a medical marijuana, they thought that absolved them of being able to drive. They thought they could smoke it and drive still. Then we had recreational marijuana and it increased. Last year for us wasn't quite 70%. We had 472 misdemeanor DUIs that we did. We had 88 ag DUIs. I don't know what ag is for you guys in Illinois. Ag for us is 0.15 or greater. Extreme DUI. Ag DUI we had 88. Extreme DUI we had 99 extreme DUI, so 1.15 or greater. And then we had 239 DUI drugs. So over approximately 50% of our DUIs last year were DUI drugs. And the majority of those were actually marijuana. Now, we're very aggressive. We've done really well in the past. We've had some changeover. A lot of my guys that were really good motors promoted. And we have a motor unit and we have a traffic unit. So they're two units in the same unit with two different sergeants, but they're in the same bubble. And we have some guys that are in cars, some guys that are on motorcycles. We have really great guys, and we've seen as some of those guys promote, our numbers have dipped a little bit. But a lot of the numbers that have dipped are because a lot more people are using designated drivers. That's a reportable thing. We're seeing an increase in that, that's great. But it's also, we're seeing a decrease a little bit in our DUI numbers, what does that affect? Your funding, right? It affects the amount of money you get. But we're trying, our guys go out and work hard every day, but these are some of the challenges. Here's part of the reason I'm passionate about it. I have 5 kids. They're all different. Anybody, I'm not even gonna ask, but all of you guys, if that have kids, know multiple kids, they're very different. Come from the same 2 parents, totally different. One of my kids, my middle son, he struggled. Probably about the time I started getting into politics and running and was spending a lot of time away from home. My wife is a flight attendant. he was hitting the age of about 14 years old. And so he started getting into drugs, started hanging around the wrong people, and we started getting a few calls. I was so embarrassing running for a sheriff position and having them call you to tell you they're out with your son. I used to get them home, I'd be like, honestly, I'm gonna lose this race because you keep getting in trouble. And it was so embarrassing for our family, but I was also concerned for him. So my son continues to go down this path. We struggled with him all through high school. Now he gets to where he's 18, I think, at the time. And one of our neighbors caught him at a stoplight, passed out. And I wish a cop would have pulled him over. They didn't. It was a neighbor said, hey, you need to get off the road. You can't be driving. So we said, no more driving our cars. You cannot drive our cars anymore. And one day we went to a charity event, and I get a phone call. And it's my son. He's like, Dad, I just hit a guy on a bike. So we immediately, everything rushes out of your head. It's just, whoop. I don't know what those people said. I couldn't get out of the house fast enough. We jumped in our car. We drove over. It's probably maybe 5 minutes away. We get to there and we see the car. The car is busted up in the front. My son's standing there like a lot of the people that we deal with. He's got Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle pajama pants on with no shoes and a jacked up black t-shirt, It's just, he looked terrible. And I walked up to him and I looked at him and made sure he was okay. Then I walked back to where the guy was laying on the side of the road and he was not okay. And I was praying, don't let this guy die. Because if he dies, it's a whole nother thing. It's bad enough as it is. It takes it to a whole nother level. Then I walked back over to my son, and I'm telling you, one of the hardest things that I have ever done in my life was I walked back over to my son, and now he's surrounded by multiple deputies. My deputies, we had actually called a sheriff's office, neighboring sheriff's office to take the case, but at this time, all my deputies are standing around him. And I looked at him and I said, I'm sorry, but I have to leave you here. If I stay here, they're going to say that I influenced this case in some way. You're on your own. And my wife and I walked off. We got in the car, drove away. I knew what he was in for. I knew that he was going to get processed. He was going to go through all of this, and he did. And they picked him in. They took him in. They took his blood. He went through the whole thing. I think he's angry with us for a long time for leaving him there, but we had no other choice. Fortunately, the guy survived, but not before. The guy was seriously injured, cost us. They sued us, or we settled in lieu of being sued because the car belonged to me and he lived at my house. I was the responsible person. So it hit our family. My son gets charged. Ultimately, he ends up spending 6 months in my jail. 6 months. You want to know how you treat your inmates? Put your own son in your own jail. My son spent 6 months in my jail, and by the time he went to jail, you know how the system works. Like, you get a DUI, when do you go to jail? Like a year and a half later, 2 years later. So by the time he goes to jail, he actually had been clean for over a year. So this was kind of the catalyst to getting him clean. But he wasn't going to be absolved from the consequences of his actions. Here's what I wished, and there's no blame. I wish somebody would have stopped him. I wish he would have been pulled over on a traffic stop. That would have saved that guy on the bike. It would have saved our family a lot of grief, a lot of money, a lot of time. You guys can imagine, I got absolutely obliterated in the media. Sheriff's son gets DUI, all this. Then they insinuated that I did something to help him on the case. Luckily for me, I believe what Aristotle says. He says the only way to avoid criticism is to do nothing, say nothing, or be nothing. Well, I refuse to not say anything. I refuse to not be anything, and I certainly refuse to not do anything. So for me, it was a lot easier to take the blows, but for my son, who was already struggling with drugs and now facing this was a tough thing for him. But in the end, it was what he needed to get through it. What you are doing out there, those stops you make not only may save somebody, but those stops you make, I don't think we as cops think about the effect that it might have for a family who is struggling with that person that you're stopping in that vehicle. What you're doing will matter to that family. Even though it comes with a whole bunch of BS on the backside of it, it's helping them get the help they need in many cases. Sometimes what we do, stopping people for DUIs, changes the trajectory of these people's lives. This is part of the reason why we work so hard in Pinal County. I know we talked a little bit earlier here today. I don't want to make you guys jealous, but look, if we pull you over for a cracked windshield and you take off, we're chasing you. You flick a booger out the window, we're chasing you. Now, literally, we will chase you. I ran into some Mesa PD guys the other day, and they go, man, you guys pursued somebody into our city the other day, all through our city, and we wanted to get involved so bad, but our admin kept telling us, just stay away, stay back from a distance. We're notorious for chasing people into other people's cities and counties. We have a philosophy. You break the law, we're going to hold you accountable. And what we do is we let our officers determine whether it's safe to continue to pursue or not. We let our deputies make that decision. They're the ones in the car. Very rarely will a supervisor call off a pursuit. We deal with a lot of pursuits on the I-10 almost every day. We just had a pursuit that wasn't on the I-10, didn't have to deal with smuggling. It actually originated, and it was somebody who was under the influence trying to get away from us. We ended up chasing him a while. We used stop sticks. We ended up getting him stopped, took him into custody, processed him for the DUI. This matters to us. I'm going to tell you another story of why this matters to me so much. That same son, when he got out of jail in October of 2022. And he was doing good. He had his daughter, he had his fiance, and his life was starting to work well for him. He told me on December 14th, Wednesday, December 14th, he says, Dad, I finally paid off all my fines. I'm going to be able to go and get my license back. Sunday night, I can take the test. Monday, I'll be able to get my license back, and I can start driving again. I have no more fines. He was finally going to get out from underneath all of the legal stuff that he had gotten into. So Friday, December 16th, he leaves for work. He goes, does his day at work. My daughter-in-law, and who, by the way, had lived with us for 2 years, we had helped get her clean as well. So she was like a daughter to us. She leaves, takes my granddaughter. They drive to go pick him up from work. They didn't show back up at night. This wasn't uncommon. They oftentimes would go and stay with her dad or different things. My wife had been wrapping Christmas presents that day. I had gone to a dinner, and then I went and did some Christmas shopping. I come back, and about 8:30 at night, about 30 minutes after I got home, which I'm very grateful that I was actually there, because my wife would have thought something very different. But at 8:30 at night, we get a knock on the door, and we open the door, and it's the sheriff from the neighboring county. It's 2 of my chiefs, and then 2 guys from Gilbert PD, which is a local police department. And I looked, and you know how the feeling just right out. We knew something wasn't right. One of my chiefs has actually known my kids since they were little kids. And all he did was, all he could say is he looked at me and said, Cooper and the baby are dead. Just like that, somebody struck and hit my kids in a car. He was going 70 miles per hour in a 45. They turned, he hit them, killed my son and my granddaughter on scene. My daughter-in-law was probably dead that night, but they were able to keep her alive, put her on life support. She lived for another week, and then when they took her off life support, she died. So in the snap of a finger, my life changed. Killed all 3, my 22-year-old son, my 11-month-old granddaughter, my daughter-in-law, were all killed by somebody driving under the influence of alcohol and marijuana. He was only a 0.04. on alcohol. He had just cracked open a beer, cold beer, in the center console. So his alcohol level was still fairly low, but the marijuana was a bigger factor in the accident. This goes to the prosecutor's part of it. We struggle with it. Obviously, this was not easy to deal with, and I'll tell you how we kind of got through that later on. To lose people that lived in your house and the next day they're not there, and you realize, man, I wish somebody would have stopped that guy. I wish somebody was there. Not that anybody could have. Sometimes things you can't control them, and I'll talk about that. But I wish that somebody would have stopped him. Because had somebody stopped them, they'd still be here, right? That's the thought process initially. Anyway, all three of them lose their life. This guy, 5 months later, we get the toxicology report, which tells us that, what I just told you about what he was under the influence of. But they didn't charge him. It was a year and a half later, and we're in this campaign season, and one day I'm thinking about it, and I messaged the prosecutor for the county, Maricopa County, and they said, hey, can you tell me what's going on with this case? It's been a year and a half. I haven't heard anything. Have they arrested this kid? Have they charged him? She said, hold on, I'll get right back to you. She calls me back about an hour later, and she goes, your timing's great. They're going to grand jury today or tomorrow or something. To me, that said, hey, we kind of screwed up. We forgot about it, but we're going to make sure it gets into the grand jury ASAP. But they did get him. They got him 3 counts of the manslaughter. When they picked him up again, he had cocaine and some other stuff on board again. So this is obviously somebody that hasn't learned his lesson, still out there doing what he was doing when he killed 3 people. They bonded out. He's still out there now. I just talked to the attorney the other day. He goes to trial in January. This happened. They were killed on December 16, 2022. We are now going to be over 2 years before this person is held to account for what they did. It was a year and a half before they actually put cuffs on him and put him in jail. He went to jail that night, but to put cuffs on him for the charges. So I will tell you, from the family standpoint, to the prosecutors out there, to the DUI guys who are doing the reconstruction, vehicular crimes units, get your paperwork in, get it done fast, because the families that have lost, the families of the people that are struggling, they're thinking about it all the time. And I think it becomes another case for us. It becomes another case for prosecutors. And you don't realize there are actually families that are being impacted because of the loss, and nobody being held accountable, what appears to be nobody being held accountable. A lot of people think that maybe I can't help. Maybe I'm too old. Maybe I'm too young. I'm going to tell you a couple stories. I love Founding Fathers stuff, because these are stories that will tell you that it doesn't matter where you're at, you can make a difference. You can help. The first one is back in the Revolutionary War. They're both Revolutionary War stories. Things weren't going well for the war. There's a man named Colonel Ludington. Colonel Ludington, they came to him and said, hey, take your troops home, get some rest, tend to your farms, tend to your families, then come back. So they all go home, and they had been home back at their farms, and one night a rider comes riding in. Pouring rain, rider comes riding in, exhausted, and he said, the English are marching on Concord. And so, or on Danbury, or one of those, I don't remember which one. But he says, the English are marching on one of the cities. We need all your troops. Well, here he is. His troops are spread throughout the countryside. But this rider collapsed in exhaustion as soon as he got there to tell the colonel what was happening. So his 16-year-old daughter was standing nearby, Sybil Ludington. And Sybil Ludington came up to her dad and said, Dad, I can go. I can do this. Now, any father, you're not going to let your 16-year-old daughter ride across the countryside full of English soldiers and British sympathizers. So he says, no, we're not doing that. She says, Dad, you don't have anybody else. I can do this. So finally, the dad says, okay, go do it. So she rides all night from farm to farm to farm to farm, all night until 6 a.m. in the morning when she came back soaking wet. And she was able to mobilize the army, and they were able to successfully stop that. Sybil Luddington was 16 years old. That night she rode 40 miles, 20 miles more than what Paul Revere rode when he was telling the Americans that the English were coming. You can make a difference. Sybil Luddington made a difference. She didn't have the experience, but she was willing to go out and do it and work and do the work, do what needed to be done. The second one is one of my favorite ones, and this is a guy who was on the other end of the spectrum. This guy was 78 years old, a guy named Samuel Whittemore. Samuel Whittemore was a veteran of the English and French War. As a matter of fact, he had taken a couple trophies, some pistols, a sword, and he had been peacefully living, and now all of a sudden we're back at war again with the English. And one day they find that the soldiers are going to be marching on, the British are marching on Concord. Well, Samuel Whittemore hears about it, so he goes back to his house, gets his musket, gets his 2 pistols, loads them up, takes his sword, goes out, and he heads towards where the English are. He hides behind a wall as the English, because they were able to rebuff him, so now the English are coming back. They're heading this way, and as soon as they get into distance, he pops up from behind the wall with his rifle. Boom! He shoots one of the English. It goes down. Pulls his pistols out. Boom, boom! Shoots more, 2 more. Kills 3 English. By this time, they'd had enough of it. He pulls out his sword. They now shoot him in the face. Then they walk up on him, and they hit him with the butts of their rifles, and they stab him about 7 times with their bayonets. When the English walked away, they left Samuel Whittemore, and a 78-year-old man, laying in a puddle of his own blood. An hour later, when the American soldiers came on and found Samuel Whittemore laying there, you know what he was doing? He was loading his pistols. That man lived another 18 years after that. He lived till he was 96 years old. That's the type of American spirit that built this country. That's the type of spirit that is needed in this profession nowadays. You're not too young, you're not too old, you're not too inexperienced, you don't have too much experience. This is an ever-changing game. The laws continue to change in what we're doing, the DUI investigations. Arizona is one of the better states for DUI investigations, but that doesn't mean that they make it easy. You know, if you type in DUI investigations online, what pops up? All the defense attorneys and all the information of how to get out of a DUI. Not like, hey, you shouldn't drive under the influence of alcohol. That stuff gets pushed down. All the information is, here's how we're going to get you off when you do get caught driving under the influence of alcohol or drugs, which is becoming more prevalent. Do you guys have recreational marijuana in Illinois? That doesn't surprise me. I'm not going to lie to you guys. Illinois is not necessarily leading the way on police stuff. I feel bad for you guys. I do. If you guys want to get in a pursuit or pull your gun or rough somebody up, come out to Arizona. We'll let you hang around for a few days. It'll only take a few days. We'll get you into something. I always tell people, if you want to be a cop, come to Pinal County. We'll let you be a cop. A lot of what we do, I joke about that, but part of the reason we do things like Fridays with Frank is because this narrative is shifted on law enforcement, right? They think we're all mean and that we're just out there harassing people. And so one of the reasons we did Fridays with Frank, this was kind of a little bit of an accident in how it came out. What they did is in Arizona, they passed a distracted driver law. So hands-free, you can't use your phone while you're driving. And it was going to go into effect. And so we wanted to make sure that we did a public service announcement for our citizens to tell them, hey, no more of that. This is now a reason for stop. It's a primary stop law too. So we said, hey, let's do this video. They said, who do you want to use? And I said, well, I don't know, let's use Frank. So Frank goes out, does some traffic stops, pulls this Karen over in a minivan. The ironic part of it is she has since kind of retracted, but at the time she was hot, she was madder than a wet hen. I mean, she was mad. And we put it out on social media. and it went gangbusters. And she called me and she called my PIO and she said, I can't believe you put that out there. And we said, look, don't behave like that in public. That's a simple solution to this. If you behave like that, there is no expectation of privacy in public. You might get caught with your bad behavior. And you did. And so we didn't take it down and we refused to do it. Well, it went gangbusters. It got 1 million views or more, I don't know. And so we said, hey, you know what we should do is we should do these types of traffic, tell people about traffic laws and do a video every week, and we'll just have Frank do it. We'll call it Fridays with Frank. And that's how that got started. Initially, we weren't even going to put it out every Friday, but everybody was getting so mad at us on Friday when there was no Fridays with Frank. We said, hey, we got to work even harder on this. We actually, with the social media we've done with law enforcement, the other thing we do is I go out and pull people for driving in the left lane. No left lane camping. Is that a law here? Okay. Yeah, well, I enforce it. And so does Frank. So the first video we do one every year. Every year we do a driving in the left lane video that we put out. And the first one we did got like 5 million views. The second one we did got like 12 million views. The third one we did got like 15 million views. And the fourth one we did probably has 8 million views, but we won an Emmy for the fourth one that we did. But I bring that up because what we're doing is educating the public. And we won an Emmy. We had fun doing it, but we won an Emmy because we were out there educating the public. It was for public service announcements that we won it. We were telling people like, hey, this is a law. Most people don't know. This is a law. Frank, what he does, people now know you can't drive with mud flaps, right? Or without mud flaps if your truck is too high. They know that you can't have a cracked windshield. They know that your lights can't be cracked. You can't have a white light to the rear. These are all traffic things. I have more people come up to me and say, I've learned more about traffic laws and how driving from watching Frank's videos. He is very condescendingly polite as well. So if you suck at driving, he'll tell you. But he'll just tell you, you're really bad at this. You shouldn't be driving. This is really bad. But we have fun with it. Some people don't like it. Outside, the cop haters don't like it. But the people that in our community love it. It's educational. It tells people, and what it does is it makes people realize not everybody's really cool with us. Traffic stops are oftentimes people are very disrespectful, rude, and all we're trying to do is our job. It shows us that we're doing DUI investigations, drug investigations, everything on there. We're showing the public every week, hey, look, we're out here doing our job. That's part of the reason why we do so much on social media, because where the media wants to shift the narrative that the cop is the bad guy, we're saying, no, we're the good guy. Look, here's what we do. We do videos in our jail. You can go on and watch our videos. We'll show you videos of us tasing people, dragging people down the hallway. We'll show videos of the dog biting people. And people say to me, why do you show this? And I said, because that's the reality of what is happening in there. I'm not sugarcoating it. We're not going to sugarcoat it for you. In police work, we're not in the business of good optics. The optics of what we do oftentimes are not good at all. If there's any leadership in here, please stand up for your people. You know, there's a saying, Publius Syrus says that anybody can hold the helm when the seas are calm. What we need leadership for is when the seas are rough. When people aren't looking at law enforcement the way they should or not treating us the way that I feel like you guys deserve to be treated. What the leadership is to do is to hold the helm, ensure that the crew's needs are met, that they have, that you take care of them, and that you keep the ship on the right course so that when the seas do calm again, you're in where you're supposed to be. And I think that leadership in this country has got to do a lot better on this issue. Leadership's got to do a lot better on DUIs. There's a lot of agencies out there that are not out aggressively going after influenced drivers, drug or alcohol influenced drivers. And I think NHTSA sees it in the statistics a lot of times. We're not even the largest agency out of the 15 really large agencies. We typically come in around second, third, fourth in statistics, even though we are not one of the larger agencies, but because we take it serious. not just because we are all passionate about it. I have a personal issue with it as well, with the loss that I suffered. I want to tell you 3 things that I think have made me very successful in my profession. And if you can apply these, not just in your profession, you'll be successful in your profession, your whatever squad you're on, you'll be successful in life, and you'll be successful in your relationships at home too. Because believe it or not, our relationships at home probably dictate and affect our work product more than we think. What happens at home before we leave and go to work and put on the uniform and get in the car and start driving is going to probably dictate whether we feel like going out and stopping that vehicle, whether we feel like going out and helping these people on the side of the road. It starts at home. So these are the 3 things I'll tell you that have made me successful in life. Number 1, be authentic. You know, when I first started being a sheriff, people would look at me and say, well, why doesn't he dress like all the chiefs? You know, they're like, oh, I don't like the way he dresses. And I told my chiefs, I said, give it time. Pretty soon, if I put on a uniform, they're not going to like the way it looks when I'm in a uniform. This was who I was. I wasn't going to pretend to be somebody that I wasn't. I came out there and I was authentic. Every one of us have different DNAs, or different fingerprints, different DNA, different irises. Your irises are probably the most unique thing about you. There is not a single person in this world, billions of people, there is not a single person in this world that is like you. Man, if that doesn't tell you about the majesticness or the godliness or the power of who you are, then I don't know what to tell you. You're a one-of-a-kind in a world full of billions of people. Do you understand the value of if you had a one-of-a-kind item, the value of in the world that would be? And we oftentimes can't see our own value, and oftentimes we try to be somebody else, especially with social media. We're trying to be, I actually get a few of my sheriffs calling me and saying, hey, my guys keep trying to go out and pretend they're Frank, and it just doesn't work here. And I said, but you've got to find who you are and be you, be authentic, find what makes you great, find your talents. In life, we struggle with when we go through tough times because that's life's way of dragging that greatness and uniqueness out of us. We fight it because we don't like uncomfortableness. You know, there's only 2 things cops hate. Have you guys heard this? See, they don't even want to raise their hand. There's only 2 things cops hate. They hate the way things are, and they hate change. So basically, they hate everything, all right? We don't like the status quo. We complain about it, and if we change it, we don't like that either. All right, so being authentic, don't try to be like somebody else, and anytime somebody comes in and does something different, we struggle with it. But that's life's way of dragging that greatness out of us. If we can allow it, you're going to find that your career will go to much different levels. Whether you want to promote or whether you want to be the best DUI or DRE or the best traffic guy and have the most DUIs, it honestly all starts with you accepting your authenticity and being that person that you're meant to be. So number 1 is be authentic. Number 2 is don't be afraid to do the uncomfortable work. This is a profession that we do a lot of uncomfortable work. We don't want to go out and if you're getting off at 6 a.m. and 5:45 you pull a traffic stop and the guy's DUI. That's uncomfortable. Now we got to stick around and do the process and go through the whole thing. There's a lot of uncomfortable work in our profession. There's a lot of uncomfortable work in life. There's a lot of uncomfortable work in your relationships. You cannot be afraid to do the uncomfortable work. Look, I didn't get to where I got to because somebody handed it to me. It's because I was willing to go through work that most people won't. It was too uncomfortable for them. It's too uncomfortable to be in the public eye, to get trashed on social media, to have people write things about you. That's too uncomfortable for most people. That's okay with me. It eliminates all the competition. But if you're willing to do the uncomfortable work, you will find your way. Did anybody watch Gold Rush? I love the show Gold Rush. Gold Rush, they'll go through it, and they will in a week dig through a room this size of dirt. And they'll process that dirt. It goes through one processor and takes the bigger rocks out, and then it goes through another one, and it just continues to refine it and refine it and refine it until the end of the week when they have these buckets of sludge. It's these 5-gallon buckets full of sludge out of a room full of dirt this size. And at the end, they'll process all the sludge. And if they're lucky, they'll get a handful of gold for that week's worth of work. Now, the majority of the people will say that's too much work, it's too uncomfortable, it's not worth it. But the gold that is at the other end of it, the good things are always at the end of the uncomfortable work. So if you can manage to do the uncomfortable work, especially in your profession, you're going to have a lot of success. You'll find that people will see it, they'll want to promote you, you'll have success in all the work you do. So be authentic, don't be afraid to do the uncomfortable work. The third one is probably the most important one. It's one that I had to learn, and honestly, it's one that got me through the things that we went through as a family. Surrender the outcome. You know, in this life, everybody who's angry, frustrated, feels anxiety, unhappiness, it's because they're trying to control an outcome that you have no control over. The reality is the majority of us can only control our attitude and our work output. If you're on a squad, you don't control that squad unless you're the sergeant. You know, if you're the chief, you control the agency. Even then, most of the stuff is still out of your control. I can do everything right and things can still go wrong in my agency. Why? I don't have control over it. So why would I get angry or upset or feel anxiety about it? These are things that are outside of my control. There's a story of an old Chinese farmer. So this old Chinese farmer, he's in China and he's got his son. They got this little farm. They got a horse that helps till the ground for him. And one day the storm comes in at night, and it's a terrible storm. And when they get up in the morning, the storm had blown down all the fences and their horse was gone. So the neighbors come over to their house and they say, "Oh man, this is horrible. You have the worst luck. This is just a horrible thing. What will you do? How will you plow your fields? You lost your only horse." And the Chinese farmer says, "Maybe we shall see." So they and his son go out and they do the uncomfortable work. They fix all the fence. They got no horse. Why fix the fence? But they do. They fix the fence. They get it all good again. They go to sleep that night. The next morning, they wake up, and his horse had returned with 10 other horses. So now they put all the horses in the corral, and the neighbors come over and they say, "Oh my gosh, you're so lucky. You're so blessed. You had no horses yesterday. Now you have 11 horses today. What will you do with all these horses? This is such a blessing." And the Chinese farmer said, "Maybe we shall see." The next day, he's got to start breaking these horses, so he sends his son out. His son gets on one of the horses. He's breaking the horse. The horse bucks him. He falls, breaks his leg, snaps it. So now the neighbors come over and they say, "Oh, this is horrible. I can't believe it. You're so unlucky. God must be mad at you. Your only son who helps you till the fields, and who will take care of all these horses? Who will help you?" And they said, "This is awful." And he says, "Maybe we shall see." The next day, the Chinese army comes in and takes every young man of that age off to war, leaving his son because of the broken leg. The moral to the story is, there is no good and bad. It's just life. There's a poem by Rudyard Kipling, "If." I wrote 2 books. My second book is called American Sheriff Rules to Live By, and it's based on the poem by Rudyard Kipling, "If." And I tell different stories of the founding fathers, stories of hope and courage and determination. But one of the stanzas of the poem is, "If you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two imposters just the same." When you win, it's not always good. And when you lose, it's not always bad. What seems good is not always good. What seems bad is not always bad. When you can start to accept that and not internalize things and surrender the outcome, you'll start to see that not only are you having success in your life, you'll find the path to success, but other people, but you'll see the doors that have been open for you that you missed because you weren't surrendering the outcome. I'll tell you what, The best times in my life have come after what would appear to be the worst times in my life. The things that have given me the right purpose, losing my children was not good, but it gave me purpose and resolve that you're not stopping me. Things that maybe before you would have said, I don't know, I don't need to go that far. Now it gives you the purpose and the resolve. If you can learn to surrender the outcome in your careers and just work hard, put your head down, focus on your attitude, focus on your work output, you'll have success. We notice that from a leadership position, we can tell who's out there working hard and who has the right attitude. So be authentic. Don't be afraid to do the uncomfortable work and surrender the outcome. Those are things that have made me successful in this life. Ultimately, what I am grateful for are people like you guys. I'm grateful that you put on a badge or you prosecute people or whatever role you play in keeping our streets safe. I'm grateful for you. Having lost a son, having had a son who went through trouble, having lost family, knowing that police stop more of those issues than what happens, I don't think you guys have any understanding of what lives you've probably already saved without knowing it. You've saved a ton of lives, and you'll probably never know. But I can assure you, some family out there is grateful that they didn't lose their loved ones. I lost mine. I surrendered the outcome. But at the same time, I'm grateful that people like you saved my other children, saved my wife, saved my family, my friends. So keep doing the great work that you're doing. And may God bless us all. My prayer is that God bless us all with the same faith and strength and courage exhibited by those patriots of old who pledged their lives and their fortunes that we might be free. God bless all of you guys. God bless Illinois, and God bless America. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you guys so much. And I think we got a few minutes if you guys have any questions for me. Yes, sir. So extreme DUI is 0.15 or greater. Ag DUI is going to be somebody who gets a DUI on a suspended license for DUI. Ag DUI is DUI with children in the car or minors in the car. But extreme DUI is, and then we have a super extreme too, which is 0.20 or greater. We don't seize the vehicles for that. We do tow the vehicles. We don't seize the vehicles. The majority of them are going to get a 30-day impound. So if you have an extreme DUI or DUI, your vehicle will be impounded for 30 days. You can't, and you have to pay the fine when you come to get your car. Yeah. Yeah, DUI laws in Arizona are really good. You don't want to get a DUI in Arizona. And look, first time offense is 24 hours in jail. Now, most of them can get their sentence delayed if they go through some classes or some of that. If you are a multiple offender, you're going to spend time in jail. The majority of the people that I have that are convicted in my jail are DUI offenders that are doing 60 days, 90 days, 120 days. The kid who killed my kids, I talked to the prosecutor, he'll do 10 to 15 years for the 3 counts of manslaughter.
Maricopa County has the roving DUI patrols. Do you have them in your county? And can you tell the audience about what the roving patrol?
So we all do DUI task force. So we have a DUI van. So we park the DUI van. I have something called a posse. Let me tell you about the posse. All right. People think these are reserved deputies. Those are like house cats. Okay. Posse guys are volunteers. Volunteers, we put them through 300 plus hours of training. We give them a take-home car. We give them uniforms, guns, badges, and they respond to calls by deputies. They don't have arresting authority. We don't let them drive code, but they'll hold traffic scenes for us, accidents. They'll hold crime scenes. Our county is the size of the state of Connecticut. It can take you an hour plus to get to the jail and then go back. So the posse guys will transport your DUI or your arrest to the jail. We book them in, and then the deputy stays on the road. So we have these posse guys that will bring the DUI van out. And then what the deputies do is they show up, the motors show up, they process them, boom, 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 turn them over to the posse, and then they're out back on the road again. So the posse has been phenomenal. And so we all have these DUI vans, much in part to NHTSA, GOHS, the funding that we get. We've been able to buy these vans. And we're constantly doing these DUI task force. And what we'll do is everybody will come from the cities, and then maybe they come into one part of my county, or maybe we go to one of their cities. We usually alternate where we're going to do the DUI task force. One thing cool that Maricopa County did, one of the biggest PETAs is trying to get a search warrant in the middle of the night, which is when all the DUIs happen, right? So what Maricopa County did, and they allow us to piggyback this, there's a judge 24/7. And so if we get a DUI, we go back, we send one sheet of paper, we fax it over. Within minutes, the judge signs it, faxes it back to us, we pull their blood. Arizona is you can choose like breath, urine, or blood. We have honestly transitioned to where we just do straight blood. So you can either give it up willingly, or we're going to get a search warrant to get the blood. And frankly, the search warrants are so easy that we get search warrants anyway. Even if they're compliant, we still get the search warrant so that there's no issues on the back end when we're going through the trial piece of it. And the blood is obviously one of the best ways. It's hard for them to fight the blood issue. They can fight the reason for the stop. They can fight the field sobriety test. They can fight all that. It's tough for them to fight the blood results.
What happens if they refuse even after you've gotten the search warrant?
When you get a DUI, it's a mandatory 90-day suspension of your license, no matter what. If you refuse to sign the admin complied consent, if you refuse to give blood, your license, even if you end up giving blood, your license is revoked for 1 year. So if you refuse to give blood to the deputies, and we're going to take it anyway, you will lose your license. So everybody who calls a lawyer, the lawyer tells them, hey, give the blood because you don't want to lose your license for a year. So that's the consequences.
In Illinois, we've had some issues about law enforcement wanting to use any type of force with even with the search warrant. Can you describe the process of what happens between the officer and the offender when the offender says, nope, still not given it?
We're going to give it. Look, there's been plenty of people. We'll call in a couple more deputies, a couple posse guys, and we'll hold you down and get the blood. And we'll put you in jail. If you resist us, if you want a smooth DUI, you can get your DUI, and we'll call somebody and you come. We'll tow the car. Somebody can come pick you up and you can go home that night. If you resist us in any way, shape, or form, you're going to get booked in. And we will hold you physically and we'll take the blood. We also have straps on the chairs if we have to strap their arms and stuff down. The search warrant says, look, you're going to get the blood. So the search warrant, the judge has given us the authority to do it. So we will use physical force. And once they know, when they're talking to the deputy, they know that this is going to get rough for me if they don't. We don't have to use physical force very often, but drunk people aren't rational either. So we've had plenty of times where we have used physical force, and we've broken a few card tables and things like that at the DUI task force. Yeah. What we've done is we've actually sent the majority of our deputies, a lot of our deputies are phlebotomists. All of our motors, all of our traffic guys are phlebotomists. A lot of our deputies are phlebotomists. We make sure that we always have a few phlebotomists on staff every shift. So yeah, that was when we decided to go with blood. We didn't want to have a company that we had to deal with, wait for them to come out. What we did is we just started sending deputies to the phlebotomy school and getting them all certified as phlebotomists to be able to take the blood. We have an intox machine. I don't know how long that has been since that thing's been used, but we use PBTs on scene. PBTs are not enough for us to be able to, they're not going to be admissible in court. but there certainly can be used as cues of impairment when we're typing up our report. Anything else? We are hiring. I don't know if you guys make a lot of money out here. Look, I know you guys are in a tough environment. Keep pushing forward. I mean, somebody's got to do the job. And a lot of us, we feel for you and in some of the areas in the country where it's tightened down on you. Law enforcement has become a little bit tougher. Holding people accountable has become tougher. Look, we still have bail. We have bonds. We have all that. So people get booked into our jail all the time, and they stay there a lot of the time. And people know it. And I'll tell you, it has an effect on their behavior. Their willingness, we see it in the amount of designated driver increase that we've seen. Clearly, things like Uber have made that easier and stuff, but we have seen it in the how many people have gone out. They know, because we also put it out on social media. We show people getting arrested for DUI. We show them stumbling on the sidewalk. And so people have seen it, and they know that we take it serious. So, all right. I guess you guys get out just a few minutes early. Thank you guys so much for having me. Thank you for all you do. God bless you guys. Thank you.